Hello and welcome. Chris from Missouri here, bringing you another video about vintage baseball cards. In this video, I'm going to show you a card. I'm going to show you one card, though, however. See, I started a couple weeks ago doing a video on like history lessons because I used to be a history teacher back in the day, and I used to love telling stories. I wouldn't tell the whole story, but I'd tell bits and pieces, and maybe to pique your interest, maybe you'll look into it a little bit more, and maybe even know more about it than I do. And see, a week or so ago, I told a story about Sandy Koufax and Bob Gibson, and I may have made a mistake or two, but I'm going to rectify that in the future. Today, I'm going to tell you a story about the early 80s baseball, and in particular, I'm going to tell you about Whitey Ball. And I'm not a big Cardinal fan, but I'm going to tell you a story about the Cardinals in a good light because, I like good stories and I like good baseball. But in the 1980s, they had this thing again called Whitey Ball. And they were a team, they were a pretty good team, but they were loaded with tons of speed. Now, there's some rules that you're not supposed to break in baseball. The cardinal rules. Everybody knows them. For instance, you hit a home run, you run around the bases. You don't stand there for the longest time, admire it, because back in the day, you did that, the next batter's going to get plunked. Or let's say you laid down a bunt to break up a no hitter late in the game, the next batter was going to get hit and going to get hit hard. Everybody knew some of those rules. Well, one of those golden rules was if you got a big lead, you don't steal bases. If you steal a base, and let's say you're up 10 to nothing, you steal a base, the next batter is going to get plunked, and there might be a little fight breaking out. Well, see, in 1985, the Cardinals were a good team. Now, I want to tell you more stories about 85 because that's when the Royals won the World Series, right? But they had a team that didn't have much power. And they didn't have much power at all. Matter of fact, Jack Clark led them in home runs with 22. And I believe they only had like 87 total home runs for the year. But yet they were a good team with good pitching, good defense, and more speed than you could put in one baseball team's dugout. They had a player. Now, well, let me stop for a second. Now, you remember, just think back in the day when you watched Little League baseball, maybe some of you Babe Ruth baseball or Pony League baseball or even American Legion baseball. There always seemed to be a guy on a team that was kind of considered a hot dog or something, but he was really like the catalyst or the spark plug for their team. If he got on base, he was going to make a lot of noise, and he was going to try to steal a base, and it took the pitcher's attention away from home plate, away from the batter, away from throwing strikes, and it focused him on looking over at first base, paying attention to that guy. And maybe he'd even draw a throw, and then boom, he'd steal second. And then he'd take his lead off at second base, and he'd walk toward the pitcher on his leadoff to make him look like he was moving, and boom, he'd steal third. And you remember that guy. There was always a guy in Little League Baseball that the pitcher's now pitching from the windup, and as he's starting to rock back, that runner on third base would take about 3 or 4 quick, loud steps and take all the attention away from that pitcher, and it was hard for him to throw strikes. And the next thing you know, he's either throwing a wild pitch or he's walking walking 2 batters, and the game gets tight and you feel the attention. And it would always be caused by that catalyst who took the pitcher's attention away. And I hated that as a catcher. And the Cardinals had a dugout full of those guys. But they had this one in particular guy that in 1985, he was Rookie of the Year. Now, they had a guy named Willie McGee that was MVP kind of player in 85, and they were good. But they had this Vince Coleman that might have been the fastest guy I've ever seen. Vince Coleman, yes. Fastest guy I ever saw running the bases, I believe. Now, there might be faster, But man, he was fast and he was loud and he took some attention away. Matter of fact, the story I'm telling you is, like I said, he was Rookie of the Year in '85. He led the league in stolen bases 6 straight years. I don't know who else has done that. Maybe you can look it up and see how many players led the league in stolen bases 6 years in a row. Now, the story I'm telling you is they were playing Cincinnati Reds, and they had a pitcher on the mound named Chris Welsh. And Vince Coleman walked and got on first. Now, Chris Welsh threw over to try to pick him off. And you might be one of these guys, but you go to a game and you hear them. They're yelling. First time that pitcher tries to pick off your batter or your runner, the fans go boo, like he's committed a sin of some sort. Well, Chris Welsh tried to pick him off not just one time. He throws a pitch, right? Then he tries to pick him off one time. He didn't just try to pick him off once in a row, not 3 times in a row, not 5 times, not 10 times, without even throwing another pitch. But he tried to pick off Vince Coleman 17 straight times. So between the time that he threw a pitch to the batter and then the next time the batter took a pitch from Chris Welch was over 7 minutes of baseball. 7 minutes of baseball without a consecutive pitch. On that 17th try, he tried to pick him off. He was safe. On the very next pitch, 7 minutes later, Vince Coleman stole second base. Now, to me, that's crazy. That might be why the rule has changed. Now, there used to be no rule, and you could try to pick somebody off as many times as you wanted, and pitchers that weren't affected by the boos of the crowd threw over there a lot, and Vince Coleman made him throw over there a lot. Now, one of the cardinal rules in baseball, I'm funny how I say it's the cardinal rule in baseball, back in those days, somewhere between, when it was Whitey Ball, Whitey's team was up by 8 or 9 runs, and somebody stole a base. Now, you're up by 8 runs. You're not supposed to throw a base or steal a base. The next pitch is thrown at the batter. Little fight breaks out. Baseball guys trying to act like they're tough, and they break him up. And after the ball game, one of the reporters asked Whitey, he said, "Are you going to tell that runner that you shouldn't be stealing bases when you're up 8-0? That's kind of breaking a cardinal rule." And Whitey said, "Hell no." He said, "If you go tell those big son of a whatever that's sitting in that dugout, if we're up 8-0, they need to stop hitting home runs, then I'll tell my guys to stop stealing bases, because we do what we do, they do what they do." I thought that was a really good quote. Now, the Cardinals took that team all the way to the World Series, and it was one of the greatest World Series, I believe, of all time. Vince Coleman went on to have a pretty good career. I think at one time it might still be the record, but I think he stole 50 bases in a row without getting caught. I think that's I thought that was a record, maybe not, but that's Whitey ball. That's a different brand of baseball. That, like I said, first baseman led him in home runs with 22. Second baseman led him in RBI with 110, but he only had 8 home runs. A total of 87 altogether, but they did it with speed. And they did it with a player that was like almost every Little League game you ever saw, with that one player. So listen, guys, I love telling little stories. Write your comments down below. Tell me if I messed up on anything, please. And remember, this is just a hobby. Collect what you like.